Going live. Hi, this is Sally Flashberger with the Wisconsin Board for People with Developmental Disabilities. And we're here for another Living Well Wednesday. We're very excited today. This is National Inclusive Schools Week. So we're here to talk about school inclusion, and we have some great presenters with us today. We'll be hearing from Rachel and Deborah from the Department of Public Instruction about their initiatives around inclusive schools. Then we'll hear from one of our great partners in our Living Well grant, Lisa Pugh from the ARC Wisconsin. She is a great advocate, but she is also a parent of a young woman who went through school all in inclusive environments. So we're excited she's able to join us. And then finally, we'll hear from one of our self-advocates, Nathaniel, and he will be talking about his experience being included all through school. So we're really excited. We're glad to have everybody here. Please put any questions in the chat. And if you're watching us on Facebook, please also just put any questions in the chat on Facebook. So we're excited to get started. So I'm going to turn it over to Deborah. She's going to get us started on our journey today. Thanks. Deborah, you're muted.
You know, I will figure this out eventually, right? And I'll just be a pro. So anyway, good morning. This is Deborah Ahrens, Adapting to Technology. I'm an educational consultant at the Department of Public Instruction. I work on the special education team, and the focus of all of my work is to make inclusive practices and inclusive communities the way Wisconsin teaches in our public schools. So I want to talk a little bit about how we got to where we are. And most people know, but if you don't, there was a federal law passed in 1975. And that is when it was a law that students that learned differently had to be included in public schools and could not be sent home, because prior to that, people like a friend of mine's father got sent home in 6th grade and said, we've got nothing for you, go home. And they weren't allowed to do that anymore. But what didn't change right away, and we are still struggling with, was a cultural belief that while students who learned differently belonged in our public schools, they didn't necessarily belong in the public spaces within those public schools. Even though the law is really clear that the environment that students who learn differently, they are part of the general education classroom first. And the law specifically tells us that they should only be removed in very few circumstances when what they need cannot be provided there. But what has happened in practice is the continuation of the cultural belief that certain students can only be educated if they are segregated from the rest of the students. And this happens more often than you might think. And it is not just students who have IEPs, it has expanded to students who learn differently and are receiving services in different programs, in Title I, in English as a second language. Students who are identified as gifted, they're all segregated and then sent back to the general education. And in some districts, that means there are as many as 70% of students who are removed from the general ed setting for part of the day. That is obviously not what was intended, and is not what we intend. So while people have been well-meaning, this cultural belief has been really hard to have people abandon. Next slide. So the Department of Public Instruction in the last few years has actually said that we support social justice and equity as part of our mission statement. And that means we are intentionally supporting districts and schools to look at their current system, and we encourage them to look at their practices of segregating students and do things differently. We support high quality instruction for all students, and that high quality instruction should be happening in a community of their peers. And I'm just going to read this slide because I think it encompasses everything I would like people to understand about the work we're doing. That students belong in their learning communities, in an environment with their peers, and educators are responsible to develop both accessible curriculum and environments for each and every student within that inclusive learning community setting. So research tells us that when students learn with their peers across the board, everybody learns better. When we mimic the natural proportions of what's going on in a community, everybody does better. A work group at the Department of Public Instruction, and we worked with Carroll University and the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater and other people who are in the education community. We developed what's called a practice profile for inclusive learning communities because we wanted people to understand this is what we mean and this is not what we mean. And so that's called the Inclusive Learning Community Practice Profile, and it's going to be put in the chat for you during our presentation. So you can click on it and take a deep look at it later, and it tells what we expect, what we see when people are just developing their inclusive practices, and what if we tell people this is not what we mean at all. Go ahead. So when we're talking to districts, and right now we're working closely with 10 specific districts who have applied and asked to be part of a grant we are managing. When we talk to them about how to do that overall shift in perspective to change that cultural belief, one of the things that they need to do differently is they have to start collaborating professionally. Teachers have to plan their instruction with other teachers. So teachers who have an area of expertise, and for some teachers, the area of expertise is a content area. For some teachers, it's special education, or it's English as a second language, or it's how to work with kids who are behind and to accelerate their learning so that they can catch up. We want all of those teachers planning together and understanding that by planning together, they are responsible for all learners. And we want to move away from these are your kids, these are my kids, this is where my kids go for instruction. We want to increase their understanding that everybody belongs, everybody who is in that child's community belongs planning for their high quality instruction. We want them to plan learner-centered experiences that look at the learner first and what the learner's strengths are and what the learner's needs are, and then plan instruction to go along with that. It's important for that community to start seeing individual differences not as problems to be fixed, but as opportunities for democratizing and enriching learning for every child in that school. So the current deficit model that most school districts function with do not have inclusive mindsets. And what Rachel and I have learned by working on a different grant is that you can't change practices without addressing the mindset at the same time or even before, because many teachers see themselves as helpers or fixers. I'm going to help this student. I'm going to fix them. And we want to flip that. You are not fixing anybody, but you are planning instruction that meets their needs. So what ends up happening, what we see in a deficit when people are first looking at what students cannot do, is the segregation that they experience when they might first find themselves eligible for special education services actually increases the older they get, so that by the time they're in high school, they are hardly interacting with their peers at all. And as that segregation increases, their achievement decreases. So the segregation is not related to their achievement getting better. It actually, the research shows us, it results in them getting further and further behind their peers. So instead, what we recommend is that students are proportionally assigned to general education. And that means if your school district population, 13% of your students are eligible for special education services, we should see at least 13% of students in virtually every class you walk into. And you know, it's not going to come out exactly because we don't divide children into pieces, but you should see that. What you should not see is classrooms that are labeled general education that have 50% of the students with special education eligibility, and the other students are made up of students that teachers have identified as needing that extra help to get fixed. We want students proportionally assigned. We want students to have a voice in their learning, and to be able to talk about their own strengths and their own needs, and for teachers and other educators to see them as responsible for their own learning and support them to be able to do that. And now I'm going to hand it over to Rachel, who's going to finish talking about the things we work on with districts.
Hi, I'm Rachel Fergine. I work collaboratively with Deborah on the special education team at DPI. And I'd like to just continue the conversation as we talk about how the department has defined and sort of operationalized what it looks like and feels like to engage in a inclusive learning community. So this next section that I would like to talk about is about the climate and the culture and the relationships within that community. So historically, learners with unique needs have been pulled out, as Deborah had mentioned earlier, pulled out of their general kind of natural learning environments. And when they aren't learning in those natural learning spaces, they miss what's going on. And instead of having the learner move in and out of their general education settings where they have to generalize the expertise of their teachers, rather in this model, we are expecting the educators to synthesize the learning for them and to come together and plan together so that the learners stay where they are supposed to be and learn in their general education settings. So when learners stay where they belong, they have a greater opportunity to grow as part of their learning community. They have more opportunities to hang out and interact with their peers. And they have more time to collaborate, connect, and communicate with the folks around them and feel like they really belong there. Additionally, we talk about in an inclusive learning environment, educators know the learning targets that are based on age-appropriate state content standards, and then they match each and every student with the appropriate learning materials to meet those learning targets. So educators will work together with each student to design the learning that connects with the students' lived experiences and cultural lenses and histories. They'll work with the students' interests and strengths and talents and build the learning around each student. So very student-centered and built on each student's strengths and interests and identities. We also know that when students are interested and engaged, they'll learn more. So when the learning is centered around them and they see themselves in the learning, they see their families and their communities represented, it gives them power and leadership within the classroom, and then ultimately will increase engagement. So peer-to-peer learning and even peer-to-peer coaching is they're recognized as strategies that really are part of effective practices that will increase student engagement and achievement. Additionally, students who co-create their learning goals and talk to their teachers about how best they can show how they know what they know and show learning, those are the students who are most likely to be engaged and learn the best. So that was a really, really quick, kind of really high level description of how the agency envisions inclusive learning communities, inclusive learning environments. We want to make sure that we provide some opportunity, of course, to ask questions. I saw that as I was sharing screen, there were some things coming in the chat. So I'll pause in a minute to make sure that Sally can get those out for us. But I want to make sure that you have access to a couple of places where you can learn more. So the Research to Practice Inclusive Communities Project, we'll toss the links, if they haven't already, we'll toss the links in the chat in a moment. This is a place where families can learn more about what resources are available to the districts in the state. If you're an educator and representing a district today, you can also visit that website. It's right within the DPI page to learn a little bit more about how we have set up supports for districts who want to do this work. Additionally, I'm going to skip down to the last one here on this slide. Additionally, each CISA has an Inclusive Communities coach that is housed within their CISA, and those folks are really well equipped to answer questions and talk more about this process and this project, and another great resource for districts to access support. And then the TIES Center has really fantastic resources for both families and educators wanting to learn more about just inclusive practices in general, and ways to change mindsets and ultimately change behaviors that center around our students who have historically been underserved, frankly. And then finally, the last slide that I have that I want to share is just, if you have questions, DPI is here to help. We've got a slew of special education consultants kind of at the ready, waiting for folks to call and waiting to match you with the resources that best meet your needs and best meet the needs of your kiddos and the students in your care. So if you have questions, please never hesitate to reach out. Just folks like Deborah and I sitting on the other end of the phone, waiting to help you and listen to your needs and match you with the supports that the state has laid out for folks. So the number here is just the number to the general special education line, and then you can be paired with someone to help you personally. And then of course you can always visit the website if you have additional questions. And that is all. I'm going to actually, Sally, stop sharing so that I can start posting some links if that hasn't been done already, but please, we're open for questions.
I tried to post the links and I didn't realize it wouldn't accept the hyperlink. So we'll have to repost as we go along. Do you know what I mean? Like I copied it from the page and it doesn't do it as a hyperlink. So I have to go
okay, yeah, that would be great. And we can always look them up too and get them posted. We'll post them on our Facebook page too. So if people are looking for them after, that will be a great place for them to go. Okay. Great information. I think that's, I think always the question kind of does come out whether what families should do if they are not seeing what you talked about in their schools. And so great information. I think parents should be, feel free to call DPI. It doesn't mean you're complaining. You maybe are just getting some information. But we appreciate you being on today. Just a great presentation. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Pugh, and she's going to share her experience as a parent and going through inclusive school with her daughter, Erica. So Lisa, you're up. Maybe. Lisa, you're muted. Maybe we've lost our friend, Lisa Pugh.
Oh, no.
All right, well, I'm going to turn it over to Nathaniel then, and Lisa will come in at the end. So Nathaniel, I'm going to turn it over to you. Nathaniel is one of our self-advocates on the Living Well grant, and he's going to talk a little bit about his experience as a student. So take it away, Nathaniel.
Okay, hold on one moment.
No problem.
Then, well, let me. Okay. No.
Hi everyone, just letting you know Lisa Pugh is back. My Wi-Fi crashed, but
all right, we're gonna have Nathaniel go, and then we'll have you come in at the end.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, here we go, everyone. Okay.
That looks great.
Okay, this is, okay, hold on. 1 second. I'm having internet problems today, connection problems today, so bear with me.
It seems to be the problem for everyone today.
So this is a presentation on how I made it through high school and college, the disadvantages,
well, it looks like Nathaniel might be frozen also. So we're definitely having some issues today.
Oh.
Nathaniel, we're definitely having some issues. So maybe I will turn it over to Lisa and then we'll come back to you, okay?
All right, well, good morning, everybody. Something wrong with Wi-Fi today. Too many children doing virtual schooling, I think, is what the problem might be. I am going to see if I can share my screen, and hopefully that will not be a problem. So I just wanted to share a little bit about my journey as a family member, and maybe any families that are listening can relate to this story. I'm not going to go into present mode because sometimes that causes problems for me. So I hope you're okay with seeing the slides the way I have them up. So thanks for inviting me to Living Well Wednesday today to talk about inclusive schools, this issue I'm extremely passionate about ever since I became a mom to my daughter, Erica. And here is a picture of Erica shortly after she was born. I think she was close to 1 year old in this picture. And so my journey as a family member really started shortly after Erica was born. She's now 21, and she was a very medically complex child. Also, the doctors told us right away she had an intellectual disability. So we knew that school was going to be something we would have to advocate for, and that would be maybe more difficult for her, and certainly different than with our other children. And that certainly proved to be true. But something that my husband and I were always very focused on was that Erica would be included and have the same sort of friendship experiences, community experiences, and school experiences as her older sister without a disability. And I think that's what a lot of families want. I know when I talk to families, it's like, I want my son or daughter to have friends. I want my son or daughter to be invited to birthday parties. I want my son or daughter to, have those sorts of valuable relationships, which in school are just as important as the math test, right? And I would say more important. But you don't get that if you're in a self-contained classroom, if you're not with other children without disabilities. Not that you can't have friendships with kids with disabilities, but you know, a lot of those children are also struggling with kind of social and other communication challenges, and that definitely was true for Erica. Erica is a person who does not use traditional speech to connect, and so she had that additional challenge of needing assistive technology and sign language and other peers that were going to be patient with her. This particular picture of her is in high school. I would have shared other inclusive experiences, but you know, inclusion has really been a journey for us with its ups and downs, as I think a lot of families can relate to. And I think one thing that for us is we always made it clear that that was a priority, and sometimes we had to make sacrifices. So was it, you know, kind of rigorous academics all the time that would require her to be pulled out if that was the only way that schools said they could provide that for her? Or was it that we thought there was more value in her participating in a group activity within the classroom with her general ed peers? So my husband and I had to be definitely on the same page about what were the values, and to us, her confidence and her ability to learn and have access to that instruction in the general education classroom was really a priority. This picture that you see here is a picture of her in a lab, I believe in her biology class, sophomore year of high school. This was definitely one of the highlight years of her inclusive career. We had teachers who definitely did a co-teaching model where the special education teacher was working hand in hand with the biology teacher to think about what are the actual grade level learning goals in a biology class, and how can Erica Pugh access that? She's not a reader, she doesn't talk, but she uses symbols. She's very smart. How can she identify you know, different species? How can she talk about the parts of a molecule? And with a very creative teaching team that incorporated symbols into her work. And I wish I had a picture of an example, because we used those teachers teamed together to take that general ed content, and they had planning time to do this, not just for Erica, but for other students as well, to take that content and make sure that Erica did have a way to identify her knowledge through symbols and other ways that she could circle things. Is it this or is it that? And, you know, one thing that a lot of times kids with disabilities who don't have that same access to the general ed curriculum might be stuck, you know, proving themselves over and over, proving that they know their shapes, proving that they know their letters of the alphabet, proving that they know their numbers, even into middle school and high school, when it's really something they have understood for a very long time, even in their preschool years, but they just haven't been given the proper tools to always share their knowledge. And then they get bored, and then there can be behaviors when they aren't respected for their own intelligence. And that certainly was true for Erica. So fortunately, we had teachers who did respect her, who could accommodate her that way. Another thing that was really important to us in our inclusive journey was Erica's participation in meetings. And I think that sometimes school teams don't necessarily, you know, prioritize that role for the student with a disability, or it comes later in their career. And that certainly was true for us. This picture is Erica participating in her first DVR meeting. So this happened when she was, I believe she was 15 years old, and we are in a room probably 16 years old at the high school, meeting with a DVR counselor and the transition teacher, talking about how are we going to work on skills that can get Erica where she wants to go after high school. And so I think by Erica participating in those meetings, sitting at the table, it just changed the conversation and kind of made our priorities around inclusion all that more important. another thing that was really important to us was just Erica participating in those sorts of inclusive opportunities that are really important to everyone. So like school dances, after school activities, even being able to go on field trips and things like that. And so we made sure that our team of educators knew that that was a priority for us, and that we wanted Erica sitting even at the lunch table, not traditionally thought of as an academic time. In some schools, and certainly in our experience with Erica, there was the special ed lunch table where all the students with disabilities sat together. Well, where do you think relationships are formed? Where talk about hobbies and interests and those invitations to birthday parties happen, and they happen at the lunch table. And so we definitely talked in our IEP meetings about the value of that and what kind of support was going to be necessary for Erica to be able to eat lunch with her friends. Another picture I wish I would have shared with you is Erica went to her junior prom with kids with and without disabilities. Actually rented a limo, and she had her pictures taken with a group of friends that she had made. Again, it takes intention and support and, kind of teaming with both families and the educators. But that was definitely one of the highlights of her experience. And as we were the parents taking pictures at her junior prom, and we thought, oh, she's going to get tired. She's going to want to go home early. No, she was the last one on the dance floor. So we had to kind of drag her out of there. She had so much fun. So, I mean, even we as parents sometimes underestimated her. I can remember thinking an 8th grade overnight field trip, would she ever be able to be overnight away from us? And I think 8th grade was the first time she actually ever was away from our family overnight without another family member. She'd stayed overnight at grandma's house before, but this was a 2-night overnight field trip. And they sent us pictures and videos, and the peers just stepped in and supported her. And it's one of my favorite memories as well. One thing that I think inclusion has led to for us is a success story around Erica's post-school life. So what inclusion does, I think, is give kids confidence, and also makes the community aware of the value of children and youth with disabilities in the community, because they're out and participating in things. So here's some pictures of some work experiences that Erica had while she was in high school. She did some different sorts of cleaning things. She did some clerical things, some shredding. She worked in the school offices and other community businesses. And then on the far right, you see what she's doing right now. She's actually purchasing a business. She's purchasing a small business in our community that helps corporations with their clean environment plans and their recycling. So she helps to pick up aluminum cans from small businesses in our town, and has contracts with those businesses, and then she crushes the cans and takes them to the recycling center. So we're really proud of her and the progress that she's made, and think a lot of it has to do with the focus and supports that we had around her inclusion. So that's my story, and I know that Nathaniel is also a success story of inclusion.
Thanks, Lisa. We really appreciate it. Lisa came on in the last minute because we had a last minute cancellation. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Your story is always great to share. And I'm gonna turn it over to Nathaniel, and we'll see if it's gonna work. If you can't share your PowerPoint, we're just happy to hear your presentation, Nathaniel. Take it away.
Good. Yep, thank you so much. Let me see. So, okay. So, how I made it through high school and college. The disadvantages. Okay, high school advice I didn't need. Bad advice from teachers and advisors in high school and college who didn't think I could make it. Some of the teachers at high school did not want me to challenge myself. So taking classes which were not geared towards college, taking applied math 1 and 2, taking not taking English 1 and 2. Uh, my so-called friends, so how to make friends in school, fair weather friends, didn't see me as a person because of my disabilities and because the activities were hard for me to complete sometimes. Some family members um, went over perspective and one really smart. Grandma was afraid that I would fail or that I would get hurt. Kind of like the helicopter term, I per se. Um, compared myself to my brother, which is um, very truthful, honest, was a very good student and didn't have to work as hard. He skipped a grade, and his friends would say, "Why are you not like your brother? Why are you not smart as your brother?" And he did actually skip the grade and was very smart. Now the advantages. Um, um, as my high school career progressed, I was able to have exams read out loud to me. Um, I was able to get practice exams. I was able to get organized materials. I was able to learn how to write my own flashcards, and I was able to have my teachers help me memorize. And we implemented most of these suggestions to my teachers. So it was a back and forth communication between my teachers and my parents at the IEPs. Now, the speech therapist, as I was working on my lessons, we would also, she would also help me with organize my materials, help me with my schoolwork, showed me how to go about answering a question, reviewing questions and my answers, plus doing my speech exercises. So I was doing what my speech therapist wanted me to do, my exercises, voice exercises, and plus I was getting help from my speech therapist on anatomy and physiology course and sounding those words out, plus my speech exercises again. So it was kind of like a team effort. My physical therapist let me try activities that others thought I couldn't do, like roller skating, swimming, weightlifting, and biking. And if I didn't have those exercises, I wouldn't be able to like go on a treadmill and I, like lift the incline to maybe 10 feet and 10 inches or whatever it is, and keep it up for 20 to 30 minutes to work on my gait. So it does have a lot of beneficials for exercising if you have a disability. Can't say enough. The occupational therapist came up with alternative techniques for me to do with school projects, like with working with Dyson, where if I can't hold something and I put the Dyson on the table, I'll be able to like cut a piece of paper or glue something on a piece of paper because the Dyson would hold the paper down so I'll be able to do a task with my right hand. Example. Helped me with whatever I needed to learn from my classes, Spanish, math, English. And then surgery, reconstructive left arm, the occupational therapist would give me about a whole year of intensive therapy so I would be able to make my own dinners, hold up a 20-ounce water bottle, um, go on the treadmill, because you have to have balance to do most activities, even balance. So if I would not have the reconstructive arm surgery and have my arm up on my chest for my whole life, I would not be able to do centered um, activities and reference letters. I cannot say enough about my occupational therapist because they have given me opportunities like today and before that I would speak my voice and have been able to advocate for those who have a voice but don't know what direction they want to take. And I cannot thank them enough. And then the IEP, individual education plan, knowing where I stood, gave me feedback what to work on and what didn't work for me. I always invited all of my teachers to attend, and most did. Parents had input, and so did I. And that's the bottom line. I really do think that, and I agree totally throughout this whole presentation this afternoon, if the child or the student is not in IEP, they don't have a voice. And if they don't have a voice, it doesn't, why is there an IEP? The voice is the most powerful thing a student and a parent can have in an IEP. And that's where decisions get made, and that's where um, people and where dreams can come true is in an IEP. It's where people can work together. Teachers arrange for me to talk to other children about what it is like to have a disability, help me build my confidence. Many did all they could do to follow the recommendations on IEPs. Some allowed me to use practice tests. Some sent tests home for me to do at my own speed, but be very careful with this one. It's some teachers will not do that. You can ask for that accommodation, but be careful. But some will not do that. It's a case by case basis. Um, don't I think that would be a very good idea because, but again, I think that that's defining. It depends on the circumstances, but please be sure that if you do ask for that accommodation, please have an open mind of what the son's teacher or what the daughter's teacher says on his or her decision, because that's kind of like I think it helped me out, but if you can get that accommodation, it would very well be a very good thing. Oh, what happened? Okay, teacher, follow therapist suggestions to do two-handed assignments so I could do them with one-handed. The therapist talked to a bunch of the coaches, so the football team coach would let me to play on a football team. And then other high school coaches let me manage when I couldn't play the sport anymore, soccer and basketball. And then a band teacher was very supportive and led me to drum corps, which I built my leadership skills. Parents expected the best from me. Parents advocated for me until I was placed in the right classes against teachers' wishes. And if the teachers wanted, so if I wanted to be in English 1, English 2, so college prep courses, the my parents had to advocate for me for hours at a time, because if they didn't, the teachers would place me in classes which were not college prep courses. Sometimes you have to have IEP meetings that last 3 to 4 hours long, and that's okay. Helped me practice exams, put in extra time to help me. Parents let me grow up, do things on my own, make my own mistakes. And I think that's the biggest key here. I still make mistakes. I'm still growing up. But I think if I didn't have those experiences in high school, in drum corps, and in college, I would not be the advocate that I am today. Summer jobs, I would make friends through my summer jobs at some outdoor adventure club and the original Wisconsin Ducks. That's where I was able to like take the lead and show that I have leadership skills. Outside activities, like that's where I was able to like lead groups of children on a bike trail to different campsites. So we would pack up our bikes with camping gear, go 20 to 30 miles a trip, back and forth. Drum corps, we would go around the state, go out to the East Coast, and play shows all around, maybe 10 to 14 days at one point during the summertime for 3 years. And you learn life skills, and you learn how to be an adult. Friends. I made friends outside of high school because all of the friends saw me as Nathaniel. They did not see me as a disability. So they made me do chores as a quote unquote normal human being. And that's how I've become like, you have to get this done at this certain time. You have to get this job done at this certain time. So that's why I was successful at Summer Outdoor Adventure Club, at the Wisconsin Ducks, at Norman B. Bog Camp in Lake Geneva for disadvantaged children, excuse me. Attitude. I always try to think positive. Motivation. Help people find their voice and mine too. Perseverance. Worked until I succeeded. Classes worked hard, never afraid to try. Showed teachers I wanted to learn. Volunteered whenever possible. And before the pandemic, I volunteered at Edgewood College at the Cutting Edge program to figure out that I wanted to be a mentor. So I always try to work on the cause of what I was growing up. And I always look back and what I could do better. So thank you for your time. And I appreciate you, everyone coming today. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nathaniel. I just love your message. And I think it's great. You did talk about the disadvantages, but that was just a few. And all the advantages, and I think, you know, all the learning that goes on besides just in the classroom, I think is so important that you shared with us. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I don't see any questions in the chat. I think we'll probably wrap it up for today. Thank you everyone who joined us today to present. We really appreciate it. This will be up on our Facebook page, and we will post it on the BPDD YouTube page. So if others weren't able to join us, you can share it that way. So thank you so much to everyone. We really appreciate it.